Yes.
Meeting is being called to order if our videographer is ready. Okay, and we've got a thumbs up. I have just a few remarks. One is that we are going to be attempting live streaming tonight, and I can't offer you any more information than that. But you may notice that the sound system is remarkably improved, although that is along the panel. So anybody still sitting in the audience will need to come to the mic to get heard on video. Is that right? Yes, thank you. So everybody, if you're speaking tonight, please come up to the mic. We have, just wanted to give you an update on our poll workers. We have selected them. The poll workers met with the election judges. Thank you, John King, for coming. And they've figured all the things out that they need to know and the scheduling for when they will be at the town post office election day on May 6th. So I think we've got that pretty much set out. Unfortunately, our administrative assistant, Elizabeth, isn't here tonight. She probably would have been able to give you more information about the poll workers and election judges. Also, Hans Wegner is not here tonight for family reasons. Third thing to say quickly is, and I'm not sure I see them, but we were going to have some visitors, special visitors tonight. I don't know if they'll be coming in late, but they are the Boy Scouts, Troop 463. So if they come in a little late, I may just interrupt the meeting for a moment just to let them get settled, and they're there to be earning their communication and community citizenship and community merit badges. So that was part of their reason for coming tonight. Anyway, that is all I have to say. So, on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Everybody okay with the agenda?
Fine with me.
Okay?
Yep.
That's unanimous. Stephen, I see a head shake?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's unanimous. Okay, we also have next item is the approval of minutes from March 11th of a regular meeting. Anybody have any changes to the minutes?
There was just one issue, and I forgot to bring my copy of the ordinances with me, but with respect to the variance, the sentence stating that the homeowners need to demonstrate that they will experience a hardship if they are not granted the variance, that is one of the two conditions under which, so I just wanted, we don't need to actually put the legal requirement in there, so we could just strike it, but I don't want to have any confusion if we're stating something in here that's not the entire picture was actually in the ordinance.
Okay.
So I think that was the only, that was the only part of that summary that I thought needed to be changed.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Is that everybody in favor of that strike?
Yes.
Yes. Do you have others? Or?
I don't think I did. Let me just look. That was the one that jumped out at me. I don't think I have any others.
Two sentences above that, there's a sentence that says the open porch was added 10 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. It says the homeowners received a variance at that time. I don't believe that was the case. I believe it was built without a variance. Is that correct?
Would the homeowners like to comment?
You did you have a variance in 2010 when you built your? No. So
Okay.
I think we could just shorten it up to say the open porch was added in 2010.
All right.
2010 is correct?
Great catch.
Okay, so
Stephen, thank
2010
you.
rather than 10 years ago.
Okay.
And then
Strike the rest of the sentence.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's just a small thing where I think there's credit for it, but I think even more credit was due. Somewhere in there it said like extra support from on the Historic Preservation House tour. It says with extra support from committee member Nancy Walls. It's really what the correct word is, but she really kind of was the genesis and the spearhead in doing the lion's share of the work. The committee has all been energized by her, so I don't know, maybe it's just a slight rewording of that.
Would you like to
I can
recommend a
read
couple words?
Yeah, Yeah, maybe it was,
Leadership?
yeah, the idea was initiated and has been spearheaded by Nancy
Okay.
Walls with energetic support from the rest of the committee.
So it would
We
read,
had committee member Nancy Waltz, who
Who
spearheaded,
initiated
who
or
initiated
spearheaded, yeah,
and energized,
the rest of the committee.
initiated the idea.
Whole committee in general is just working very hard on it, selling tickets,
Sure,
getting
I
everything
figured as
prepared.
much,
so-
right? And energized committee. To coordinate, right, or to organize. Would you like to read that, or are we okay, whatever we,
Yeah,
Is there.
yeah.
we're good?
I think-
Capture
Good
the
enough?
spirit.
General
Yeah, she's got
sense.
it.
Okay.
Okay. I don't have any other changes.
We all good?
Good.
Seeing some nods down the end of the table? Okay, so with those changes, the minutes are approved. Okay. Do we have any presentations by residents this evening? And if so, we'll keep it to a short timeframe.
Too much paper
Okay.
there.
We will move on. We have unfinished business. I think, Stephen, that would be yours. It's the variance hearing
Okay.
for 10702 Keswick Street. And the reason I'm being more specific with the agenda tonight is so that you can get to those points in the videotape, in the video recording, to kind of know where those are. Okay.
Here's what we have. There's been some discussion, I guess, at the last meeting and some in between meetings about this. I tried to summarize this today. So council has reviewed the variance application for 10702 Keswick Street. House is a two-story dwelling that was originally constructed in the 1950s as a one-story dwelling. The second story was added in 2010 and includes a roofed, open porch-like area with columns and a balustrade over the front portion of the original house footprint. The lot is unusual. It has a one-story or more difference in elevation as it slopes downward from Keswick Street towards Shelley Court. The proposed alteration does not change the footprint of the existing house, which is plus or minus 14% of lot coverage as calculated by the Land Use Advisory Committee. This is under the 18% maximum for lot coverage by a main building. Approval of this application for relief is in harmony with the general purposes of the chapter and will not be contrary to the public interest. The proposed alteration does not change the footprint of the house and with additional built footprint out onto open space on the lot. In granting this variance, the council requires that all construction be within the footprint of the main section of the main house, above and or within the line of the brick 1950s facade from corner to corner. I should have said at the beginning of that, that was the end of it, but I should have said at the beginning of it, that was my summary of kind of discussion, so I wanted to put that out there. I mean, just explain it, but if there are questions or differing thoughts, we should discuss.
Although to clarify, we didn't actually have any meetings about it.
No,
We
just
had
little individual
discussions. We had no meeting
Yeah,
about it.
individual calls.
Okay, any discussion, any questions from the council?
Do you want to move it?
I move to grant this variance.
Second.
I'm sorry, can we hold? Yes?
Yep.
Yes, you may. Just the name and street, John.
John King, Argyle Avenue. I was on the land use task force, and we discussed the issue that Garrett Park is the only place in Montgomery County where you are not permitted to build straight up on your front facade, regardless of when your house was built. My house has the same issue. I have a similar porch. I have no intention of glassing it in. I like my porch. But everywhere else in Montgomery County, if you want to build straight up, the county lets you. Garrett Park has decided that the front building line does not extend above the first floor if you put a second floor on. And I think that's something the land use task force wanted to change, and the town council never addressed. And I think it would be useful for the town council to look into whether going straight up on an existing footprint would be a reasonable approach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
I guess, thank you for that, John. I guess, but just one clarification, you can build straight up anywhere within your building envelope. Well, if it's back behind 30 feet, you can. If it's, yeah.
There are many houses in Garrett Park built in front because it used to be R60.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a, yeah,
we're
kind of a
getting
different-
we're getting the hand
Yeah.
signal, sorry.
Well, and a lot of this, I guess, John, you and I know this because we did the whole land use task force, I think it was about 8 years ago in this room. John and I put together a presentation with all the results of that land use task force. That was one of the things that was looked at during this, but it was never
There
passed.
are many properties in Garrett Park built when it was R60
Mhm.
at less than 30 feet as the current R90 setback requires. And all those properties may not build straight up
Yeah,
by law,
including next door.
everywhere. Any place built under R60 less than 30 feet behind, my house 26 feet,
Well, it's
I
our
know where
idea.
Rulan's house is, you have to go back. So we went back 4 feet, up 2 feet, got a nice 6-foot balcony. It's comfortable. It gets dusty.
Okay. Appreciate that history. There may be some parts of the code that might be re-looked at. I think I've heard the land use committee members kind of mention that. No timeline, just.
Yeah,
there's
we're
been
looking at some
some of that.
some issues for down the road.
Okay. Point taken, thank you. Okay, so we were in the middle of a motion. You raised it. Who seconded it? And so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, thank you. You have your variance.
Can you give this to Andrea before I forget it?
Okay, next on the agenda are 2 action items. The first one is the introduction of the ordinance 2019-8. It's the FY20 budget, and Andrea and I will discuss that. Before we go any further, does council have any questions?
I do, just as a general
Sure.
process question.
Sure.
Are there any new things in here that are changed from what we saw at the
Yes.
second budget workshop where we were putting together and discussing, or we were discussing what you had put together for the 2020?
Yes.
Okay, so there's, okay. So
Highlighted.
you'll tell us in here which ones are new from
Yep.
what we discussed at that workshop? Okay.
The items that are highlighted in yellow, both in the budget notes and on the actual budget tables, are new from the work session.
Okay.
So if we discussed something else, but it didn't necessarily change a number, then that was noted in the budget notes. If we changed a number, then it's generally in both the budget table and in the budget notes.
Okay, okay. All right, so we're gonna walk through all those?
Would you like to? Or would you like to take a few minutes, skim them, and see what's... There is one big question, I think,
See all
for the
those
council.
changes.
Yeah.
For the council, the big question is really the local property tax rate.
Right,
We
certainly.
really have to talk about that. Or not talk about it, but make a decision.
There it is.
The current budget table for FY20 does include an increase of 4.5 cents. 4.5 cents, what is it?
Less than a half cent.
Less than a half cent. The local tax rate is currently 20 cents per $100 valuation on property, and our constant yield tax rate, which, if you want to get into it, we can discuss that, but it is dropping, and Andrea and I are suggesting that we raise the local tax rate to 20.45 cents. So it's 0.2045. I think that gives us maybe about 16,000 more in revenue, but it also helps boost the constant yield for next year, which as I've been trying to explain, and it's kind of difficult, might be me, but as property values rise, our constant yield drops, and the state defines that constant yield as the holding the revenue at a constant, at a steady number, and as a proportion to the future assessed value. So in order to make the same amount of revenue as we made this year, based on a higher property value projected for next year, our constant yield is dropping. So it's not equal to local tax rate, it's actually lower. So think of your ratio, your fraction. Your numerator is getting smaller and your denominator is just getting bigger. So that's critical piece of information, because if the gap between the revenue that's earned in the current fiscal year against the against the assessed value for future, if the two revenues differ by more than $25,000, we have to have a public hearing if we want to keep that. But if we want to, if we want to adjust and try to close that gap and close the constant yield tax rate, the only way we can do that is by making our local tax rate lower than the constant yield, which, as I just mentioned, the constant yield is continuing to drop. So it doesn't give us a lot of room. Anyway, so this would be sort of a nudge forward. We'll see where we are next year, if we have to nudge it even further again. Last year at this time, or previously, I think earlier, you all had voted to drop the local tax rate by a penny from 21 cents down to 20. So we want to boost it up just a little bit. We want to kind of push the constant yield back up. There's the trending, as we saw in our graphs, showed that property values recent years are trending upward, which would only make the constant yield continue to go down. And I'd like to welcome Troop 463. Thank you for coming. And I'm seeing a hand. Yes. We would love for you to use the mic. It's the only way we get it on tape. Can you, there you go.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine. You can hold it. That's good. Yeah.
So my question would be concerning what would the extra $16,000 be used for, and how it would be a significant bonus to the current tax rate.
Wow. What a great question. What's your name?
My name is Daniel.
Daniel. Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Would you like to answer that, Andrea?
Sure. We have looked at a variety of different things that some of the additional revenue could be used for. So one of the examples is our current town office space could maybe be configured differently, and it's possible that additional revenue could go towards paying somebody whose job is to look at office space and how it's laid out and see if there's a better way that it could be laid out that would be more efficient for everybody. Or at least a piece of that could be used for it. Probably wouldn't cost $16,000.
Good. All right, thank you. I think if there's a burden to that, the homeowner, if you did just a simple math average, it would be somewhere about $34, something like that, per homeowner for next year.
Quick question on it. The 0.2045, what's the science behind that versus say 0.204 or 205? Was it seen as too high or too low on the ratio, or?
No, I think it was more just the forecasting model.
The upper bound was 0.2075, if I remember right. Unless I'm crossing my wires.
Yeah, 0.2075 would have had us exceed or be right at the $25,000 mark. We didn't want to get that close in terms of already showing a gap in revenue. So we brought it down. So no real magic to that other than some forecasting, and like Andrea said, staying away from the upper bound.
I couldn't hear you.
Yes. Sorry, what? Sorry. Does that help a little bit?
It does. I just
I think
wonder.
we put out some graphs, Stephen, if you wanted to look at those quick
Yeah, I remember
from
we
last
saw
time.
them, but I'm not sure if matters a whole lot. So,
I don't want to shorten any discussion on this issue, but I had a couple other questions on other places. Are we going to march through it, or should we just ask
I think it
specific
was,
questions
it was
about
where
things
some-
that are changed from what we saw in the budget workshop?
yeah, I think if you had an opportunity to sort of go through it, if anything stuck out that was questionable, we weren't going to go through everything unless that's what you all wanted to do.
I think for residents' benefit, it might be helpful to go through some of the information that we reviewed during the work session.
Okay.
That you talked about. I wrote some of it down. You
All
talked
right.
about it before, but
All right, go
in
for
terms
it.
of how we came up with some of the projections and sort of what they're looking at. So in the materials that are over there, as we said, the items highlighted in yellow are the projected revenues or expenses that have changed since the FY20 work session that was held last week with council. And the projections are based on both qualitative and quantitative information and analysis. So Mayor Kaki had multiple discussions with staff from the state, the county, and other municipalities. There were discussions with town staff, with different committee members that are volunteers. We also did some analysis and models, and the inflation rate of 2.04% was used.
In general.
And, in general. And ultimately, the desire is to have an efficient, organized town office and a town that everyone can be proud of. I don't know if there's anything you...
No, I think I'd like to just give a shout out to the town manager who, at the time of our meeting on the budget work session, had us all fill out little sticky papers with one word. We each had 3 words we could write down that was sort of where we thought, what we thought of the town, what we wanted the town to be. And it was a great way to get us all sort of together on the same page. Not surprising, we all shared pretty much the same views. And it was a nice entry into what was going to become much more of a complex kind of subject. So my thanks to you for doing that. That was wonderful. It was her idea.
So is it a good point to ask a couple questions then?
Sure.
So these are different from what we saw at last week's. Well, some of them are similar, right?
Yeah,
I mean, not all of these are absolutely new.
Right.
We've already considered
So-
adding town staff, for example, moving professional services. One question I had, and I didn't bring my budget workshop notes with me. With respect to the line item under operations, line 12.0, town committees, with respect to the $2,000 for the communications advisory committee, did we have a discussion about what that number was and why the advisory committee would need 2,000?
Dan, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, we talked about it. That was the.
I'm sure we did, I could have forgotten it.
But so, in
Right.
other words, so I don't have any new information there. It's just, that was the thought of having some funds so that if we're gonna go with digital signage as a communication tool,
Oh,
that we
that's
would
right.
have money allocated for
Okay,
it.
that's right, that's the potential.
That's right, but I don't have
Sorry,
any
yeah,
additional
I
detail.
forgot that detail, okay. That's right, we did discuss that, and now I recall it.
Piggyback one thing on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering if it's really earmarking for physical equipment funds, would it be better to just put that in the Penn Place bucket and not necessarily have to have it in the committee bucket? Because it's not like the committee is really spending it on supplies or things like that, something permanent capital use. That may not matter, is the question.
That's good.
I think it's more of just a sort of a protocol, like we could put it in the larger bucket with the note that it's allocated, because I agree with you, it's not now discretionary funds for the committee to spend.
Yeah, it's not travel or
It doesn't
things
set a
like that.
benchmark for budget for the future either.
Right.
Mhm.
But it does lend itself towards who's going to be
Yeah, I mean, I think
managing
it's-
that and what kind of content to put on, and that's why I think we just left it with the communications committee, because, and they would be sharing those ideas of content, I guess, also with the archives, because the archives was interested in doing something as well, so. It's sort of a one-time purchase. We could have put it with
Yes, it
Yeah.
could go under, like, infrastructure and equipment, for example.
I think it's better to leave it where it is because we know what it's earmarked for. It's gonna be harder later on, especially if we end up overrunning something in Penn Place. I'd rather know we're moving it than move money to Penn Place for whatever it was than to have this 2,000 get gobbled up by accident. And if at the end of the day we don't use it, it's just gonna go away as carryover for next year. So I would just say for purposes of tracking, we leave it alone.
I mean, that's fine. I really don't care one way or the other. But I do think it's important that, you know, it's not setting a benchmark for this particular committee year over year when we've just now given Historic Preservation Committee a $500 budget. So, you know.
Right, well, and that's, none of that actually is setting precedent for the future, right?
But
All
yeah,
of
just
these
to
committees,
make sure that people
there's ebb and
understand
flow
that.
on the budget and the funding needs, so.
So the other questions I had, with respect to, under capital budget, line 29.0, we are renaming that whole line item public spaces, right? In the
I think
draft
we did.
budget, it's still reflected
Oh,
as
yeah.
committees.
Yes, sorry, I got that in the notes, but not in the actual.
Right,
budget.
yeah,
Yep.
that's,
good.
I mean, totally fine, but, my substantive question on there, under 29.1, I recall that we had the discussion in the meeting about the potential ideas of, you know, lights to the basketball court and or redoing the field next to the swimming pool, but I again, this may just be my memory, I hadn't recalled that we actually said we were gonna spend $5,000 per. And I am certainly not at all averse to looking into what it would take to do those things, but I'm not quite sure I want to allocate, you know, $10,000 total to be spent towards both those things, in light of, you know, other competing priorities we may have, such as town hall renovations. I did not recall that we committed or
For the
said
five-
we would spend that much on either one.
I remember only because I was the one championing the looking at the redo of the baseball field, and that was supposed to be for our town engineers to be able to evaluate the thing and then make a determination as to what it was going to cost.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
come back with
this is
estimate.
only for scoping with Clark Nazard. This is not for
Right.
actually building it out, right?
Well,
Right.
especially for the one for sure, and I believe for the other it was the same way. Although it was
And I
probably
think that's
I mean-
that where it's sort of, that money, where it says like, at least in the notes here, explore adding, and so there were
Yeah.
funds to potentially explore it. And then, I think what we'd said was, we could probably explore the lights for
Right.
free.
Right, I was gonna say, it doesn't take $5,000 to explore the lights, right?
So I think it puts some placeholder there. My hunch is we explore it for free and it actually costs more.
Right.
And I think that exploring the ballpark could potentially, depending on what we mean by explore at that point, if explore means explore and develop plans, could cost more than that.
It would,
right.
And so I think maybe we could look at that as $10,000 for exploring the improvement of those open spaces, those public spaces.
I mean, I'm not objecting to it, it just seemed, I wasn't quite sure that we were ready to commit that much money, you know, to essentially what was investigatory as opposed to expending it.
Right, my notes are 5 to 10.
One option we could do is to kind of just explore it amongst ourselves. In the meantime, hold a budget for it, and if it's decided not to do anything substantial, then move it out in the mid-year. Or probably,
Right, if we're gonna have any engineering work done, or, you know, bring in any outside contractor to help with the field,
yeah.
we'll need to have some kind of an RFP or bid proposal prepared. So that's where, you know,
Yeah,
Clark Nazar
trying to
comes
put
in,
together a study.
as well as with, if they do an initial exploratory study or proposal. But then there's also the RFP piece as well that they develop, and that's a cost, so.
So it really needs regrading.
5 to 10 is
it,
a fairly good range
So
here.
it needs regrading, it needs improved drainage, it needs a fence, it needs a lot of
It
things.
needs,
Right.
yeah, mountain of dirt,
Yeah. We should call it a mud field, not
and maybe,
a
yeah,
ball field.
yeah, right, the drainage is a big one. Okay,
Those are the only questions I had from.
I had just one, it was more a comment. I still have this slight concern about the committees were added that GP Creative Diversity Circle. I just worry that it has the potential for a political connotation to it. Like, what if there was another committee that had a much different political potential to it that was opposed, and we'd all see that and say, well, I can see why it doesn't matter, or it doesn't make sense. This one just seems out of place to me as a town-sponsored function, especially when it feels like more of a grassroots thing to me, whereas when we had somebody came in and talked twice about the dog run, they were told that it really should be a grassroots thing. I feel like the reverse would be more appropriate, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I'm not sure, did we send that out to everybody, the sort of the vision and
Yes,
I can't access
sort of the
my
mission?
email.
Okay, so here's what was sent out to the printed out.
Great. Do you have it? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I only have my copy because.
That's good. I was going to go to my emails.
Okay, so it says, good morning, Andrea and Elizabeth. The vision for a diversity circle is to host artistic projects that involve community and bring about exploration, awareness, and inclusion of all sections of the community, thus emphasizing the global community theme. The goal is to have creative sessions in art, prose, poetry, photography, music, cooking, etc., once a month with topics from various cultures, lifestyles, and philosophies. The first event explored mirror tile art from Jaipur, India. Sorry for mispronouncing. I am planning to have the next session focus on writing style. If anybody wants to.
Thank you for reading that. I don't see it as politically motivated. I see it as a cultural theme, and one that I would love for the town to be, sort of stepping forward and embracing. I also, as we also talked about, I also want to mention that, depends if it has traction or not. So we know there's a couple neighbors who want to work with Sangeeta to make this happen on a regular basis. No telling what level of participation we'll have from the town. Like I mentioned, when I did attend the first one, it was really exciting, fun, and it was well turned out. A lot of people came. So all I can say, Stephen, is it sort of depends on the traction, but I don't see it as a political.
I guess
So-
I have a different concern about it, and that is not so much whether it sets any kind of a precedent of funding any kind of political viewpoint, which I agree with Stephen would be inappropriate. But, we do have a lot of different community groups in the town, and the activities that they put on take money and resources. Like, are we going to subsidize the Film Society? I know that they charge, a small amount of money to cover their costs. Susie Gifford and her colleagues run the art workshop every year. And I mean, it's, tremendous. They do amazing things with the kids. The supplies cost them money. They do charge, a small amount to the children who participate to cover their costs. All of these contribute to the town. There's, the artwork that the kids do is displayed in the Penn Place Gallery for everyone to enjoy. All of those things are community driven and they benefit the town, but we don't, as a town, devote the town's financial resources to all of them. So to my mind, even setting aside any political viewpoint issue, the question is where we draw the line in terms of town funding for community activities that, the community may support, but that we're not in the business of funding as part of our budget.
I have a concern about it also. I think when I first heard about it, I knew that we were all in agreement. Everybody wants diversity and wants to send a message of inclusiveness. So I think we want it to be a town where everybody's welcome, frankly, except people who don't support diversity. So I'm not actually sure every viewpoint is welcome here. But when I saw the email, I happen to not know the resident, but so just with a little online digging, it seems like to me she has a business that kind of does this thing. So I agree with what, at first, when I first heard Stephen's comments on it, originally I didn't agree with him. I thought, hey, what's the big deal? This is a good thing. But reflecting on that, understanding there's a business connection, I don't think it's a good idea, so it doesn't have my support, but I'm happy to put my money where my mouth is, and like, I would contribute to fund it as a civilian. I think it's a good thing. I would help her raise money in town individually, but I think it's a hard thing for us to explain how we're putting town funds towards it.
So those are all good points, and let me give you a little bit of the history first, and a little bit of correction. First, Sangeeta stepped forward to be the town's rep on the Martin Luther King commemorative holiday that the county puts together. And, you know, part of that is also to raise awareness of, you know, diversity and inclusiveness. And the town really hasn't done much of that. And we talked at great length, all of us in the town office did, about this and whether, you know, this made sense. I did encourage Sangeeta to, you know, reach out to other groups in town, like the Citizens Association, the Women's Club, and the Parents Group. I don't know what kind of communication efforts were made. I think there's still a possibility that could happen, and I think that would be a great place to do it as just one more kind of a social kind of event. I think that would be great. And then the third thing, while she does have a business that looks like this, and you know, I was alarmed the first time I read the calendar event, and I spoke with her about it and said, you know, you can't promote your own business. What she did do for this particular event, this very first time, was she actually provided all the materials, and there were a lot of materials she provided. But she knows that she cannot be, you know, bringing her business into this. So, and I think with more people around town, you know, helping to develop and coordinate this kind of event, it'll be less focused on what just she has to bring. So,
But I think
That's
that's
sort of
the
the history.
appropriate
Yeah.
point for
Yeah.
community support to come
yeah,
in.
yeah, I do
And
too.
you know,
agree.
I realize this is a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but again, given how many community organized programs we have that anyone can participate in, and no one is excluded from doing any of those. But I'm really not comfortable setting up a funding for this or for any other of the groups that do have longer standing. I think the appropriate place for that community support is from the community, not from the town budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's
I
how
would,
people feel.
I would tend to agree, especially earmarked towards one particular committee versus all the other committees, which we have a number of them. And I would think that reaching out to the Citizens Association might be a first step, really.
Well, and it was done, so I just don't know what the results were, except that we were still hosting it. And understand this, though, the timing of this was on, you know, the, the commemoration or resolution of the National Day of Racial Healing, and Black History Month of February. So this all was, it was all coming up around that time. It just happened to finally, you know, gel together in March. But
And-
that's where, that was what actually, you know, levitated all
Right,
this
and
up.
I
so.
think that's a great thing, and
Yes.
I think it's great that
Yeah.
that happened. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
going forward,
Yeah.
without a much bigger discussion about what other community groups get town support, I don't want this earmarked for this particular community initiative, which has nothing to do with the merits of the initiative at all. It's just more of an equitable statement that we do have many groups in town, and until there's a much larger discussion about whether we are going to start earmarking town funds to support those groups in an equitable kind of way, I think this is premature to start earmarking for this particular group.
Now, what do you think about the other ones? Because we've got neighbors helping neighbors, we've got, so, you know, the other groups in there, do we, other than, we've already talked about Communications Advisory Committee. Do we look at the other ones in the same light?
I thought helping neighbors was something that we traditionally done, that was not a new.
It's fairly new. I think when I was on the council, the last year or two, we put money towards it, but it hadn't always been there. Or maybe they had been given money, but it had never been a line item. What we've done, what Andrea had advised here, was just to combine these sort of, community kind of groups into one line item called ad hoc groups and sponsorships. So there might have been a time when it was still being done, but it wasn't called out. Then we called it out in the budget. It was a line item in the budget. Now we're kind of just, putting a bunch back together under a more general heading.
Would it be easier, for sake of brevity, to basically just approve it as 12.4 ad hoc groups at 4,000, and then we'll make decisions going forward as to, on a case-by-case basis, as to what groups, if any, we wish to share this pot with?
That's perfectly fine with me.
Fine with that.
Because I think it's difficult to split those hairs right now. I mean,
Right.
we could debate an advisory committee for the entire town versus something that is more sort of issue-based or subjective, but I don't see how we'd come to any sort of clarity on that.
I think that's compliant.
Probably would have to just try to find a way to define what seems like a town sponsorship kind of a thing versus not, because I think that's what we're struggling with a little bit, is how do you tell which one is which? I mean, this particular initiative, I think, spoke to you personally, Kaki, but if it was a different mayor at a different time, they may say, well, that one doesn't speak to me, but something else does. Then we'd end up with ongoing conversations about whatever speaks to that group at that time. I think it should be something more objectively.
Let me reiterate, though, this was really for the Martin Luther King and Black History Month. That's how this whole thing came up.
Right.
And not,
Right.
it was,
Something
just fine.
and because the county was asking us, what, as a town, are we doing? And we hadn't done anything.
Right.
So we started
Years.
talking, and Sangeeta came up with this idea, and I said, it's a great idea, let's, I didn't know whether or not it would go on for every month, but,
It
So we're-
became
we're-
like sort of an art thing, I guess, with that last email, but before it was originally stated as something as though the town needed to learn more about diversity. I think we're a very well-rounded, very educated town. I don't think I'd be shocked if there's somebody that's not aware. So that's what kind of worried me about if it's.
you
it's
do
really
remember
pushing
what
the
I said
agenda.
about what we heard at Wells Park, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we should.
Yeah, we
Okay.
should.
But
end there.
nevertheless,
Yes, but
not
I
to
just wanna
belabor the
know
point,
that.
but I think if
Yeah.
we just approve it at $4,000, and if there's something that we wish to sponsor at some point, we do that at some point in the future. But for right now, it's $4,000.
I like
Okay.
Phil's approach.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. And I think in terms of the budget, line item, it is just listed that way. So, not that we'd have to amend that, so,
I'll probably add an asterisk, just to
yeah,
keep it straight in my head.
yeah. Okay. Good. So we will just combine. We need to account for this on the general ledger when, if anything comes up.
Also, just as a general question, I didn't go back and compare the ordinance to any of our previous ordinances. This is all.
Developed on, yeah.
This is
Modeled
all-
on past ordinance language.
Okay,
Yep.
great,
Yeah, I don't
perfect.
think
So there's no changes in here.
No,
Okay.
just the bottom.
Insofar as the ordinance goes, there is one thing for clarification purposes I'd like to put in.
Oh, okay.
And it occurs twice. It's in the 5th paragraph. Be it further resolved, if you go down 1, 2, 3 line, starts with council, 3 days prior. I'd like to make it 3 business days prior,
Okay.
and make the same change on be it further resolved, the second one. And it says council again, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down.
Okay,
And
which clause is that one?
Next one.
the
Very
second,
next one?
the
Okay.
second be it further resolved.
Okay,
And you'll see a thing that says shall inform council.
I see it.
And
Great.
so we're just gonna add business in front of it, so it's business
Okay.
days.
All right. So the weekend doesn't count,
Correct.
or holidays. See, is there anything else?
I guess just as a point of clarification from my fellow council members, we've all agreed that we'll go with the increase at 0.045 cents on the taxes.
0045.
Yeah, 0045.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
it's
it's
straightforward.
a
I
good
went
idea.
through all the
I agree.
spreadsheets, and I think it's sensible.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure because I know it's kind of a point.
Yeah.
No, I know,
But-
and I appreciated the explanations, you know, not only with the modeling, but also the detailed explanations we got justifying that, so that helped me understand it.
One thing we discussed in it late, it would be helpful, or I know it's not easy because there's a lot of apples and oranges, but is maybe for next year, if we could find a way to sort of tag where Garrett Park is on a total tax burden, I don't know if it's realistic even to do it, versus neighboring communities to see. I mean, granted, they have like some retail that we don't really have. but-
That's right, they call it a main street, and we don't have a main street, and there's lots of places around that have have a lot of businesses in
Understood.
their jurisdiction, so
Yeah.
they get a lot of revenue that way.
Mhm.
There's some, Andrea,
there's-
you were just talking about somebody, another one with the revenue stream really
Martin's
is high from
Additions.
income.
They're,
Yeah,
and I don't
so-
want to misspeak on this one, but
Yeah.
Martin's Addition has their income and property looks very different than ours does, even though
Their incomes are very
they're,
high.
yeah, so,
I think the best is
Yeah.
looking at the trending, and our trending has been, you know, anywhere from the 19, I think it's been 19 cents. It's shot up to 55 cents back many years ago in the late 90s, and then it came back down to 20 cents, and then 21 cents for the last 7 or 8 years, and
Mhm.
you know. So I think looking at it that way is probably the most informative for you.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we have a pretty robust town operating and capital budgets. It seems like fairly reasonable from that. I guess what I'm curious about is how is it tax burden for here, say to a mile west of Bethesda? Maybe there's not an exact way to know, but like if you have the same house and the same salary there, I guess that's the due
Talk
diligence
to
you would
your
do. if you were
realtor,
to- Yeah, and see, but I think they're roughly the same. The reason I asked is, are we doing something that's out of line with
You can't-
comparable
yeah,
communities?
Except you can't just look at the property value.
I didn't say
because-
to just look at
okay.
the property value.
All right,
so,
but I mean, you know,
yeah.
yeah.
No, and I think the other thing that muddies the water is that some towns have got services such as police and fire that we don't, and some of them are kind of small, so we get, I can see where it could be a can of worms trying to straighten it out as to who's, you know, how much people are paying. I mean, I guess you could look at it, if you want to look at the whole high level of it, you know, say, what are your overall property taxes, but it may be that you're getting different services, so that,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can quickly lose sight of what it all means, actually.
Mhm.
I think I mentioned at our workshop that the Chevy Chase Village, and you point to the capital budget, they have what they call 8 million in reserve. So they don't do a capital budget separate from their operating budget. They just use capital projects, and they're under their operating budget, those capital projects.
Mhm.
And when they need money, they take it, you know, based on the revenue and everything else, but they have this $8 million reserve.
no, I did know one interesting thing in here is it talks about public utilities, it talks about Pepco and stuff like that, but we don't tax our public utility, like poles and so forth?
I'm not sure what you're asking. You don't tax
Well,
them?
There's some of that said in the notes, right?
Right, and a
So-
note, utility property, which I'm gonna take to be things like telephone poles or power poles, the stuff that hangs off of them and so forth. You know, they've got, for instance, I'm looking at Town Chevy Chase, you know,
I can't remember.
0.66 per $100, where Martin's Addition is 1.45 per 100. So I'm wondering if we're doing that, or is that going to the county, or how?
Is it impossible to tax those things? Are those taxable?
Apparently, it's utility property. I mean, I'd have to
But
look
is
into it.
it like
Ringing a
a
bell, I
telephone
can't
pole, or is it
remember.
like a piece of land with like a substation or something built on it? Like, it's actually like a property?
I
or
don't know.
building?
Yeah, it doesn't really say.
It doesn't really say, it's just kind of vague.
I mean, I just,
Yeah.
We'll look into that.
Can't imagine that
That's a
tall
good
buckets are
question.
taxable.
I can't.
I mean, it may be that, you're
Can't
right,
remember.
maybe that it's just, it's
It's like
a
an
chunk of
actual-
land.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I guess it is, every pole is worth something to somebody.
I just.
When we start talking about the 5G small cell tower,
Yeah, that's another way of
we
looking
might
at it.
want to make it worth something.
Yeah. That's, does not make sense to me.
Well, we'll get back to you on that, because I see something, and it's nominal amount if it is. I can't remember.
So do we need to formally introduce this? If we're done with discussing
Yeah,
it?
if you're all,
Right.
if you don't have any more questions, that would be lovely.
So I guess I'll move to introduce the Town of Garrett Park FY 2020 capital and operating budgets ordinance 2019-8 and as amended.
As amended, right, thank you. Any second?
Second?
Okay, everybody in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you for, sticking with us on flexibility of scheduling the work session and going back and forth on numbers. We really appreciate it. I think we had a lot of great input from everybody. It was a pretty good discussion.
Yep.
You and Andrea did a lot of work on that. It's very appreciated.
Thank you.
I thought it was a really good, detailed dig in, especially with Andrea's first time and not a ton of history with this kind of notes. So I'm confident that going forward as well, the process can be that much better and build on it. So, I would say bravo for that process for where you're starting. It's great.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had the background, the detail that we've had here, so this is great.
Great. She did a yeoman's job. Okay. Next action item is the contract award for street repaving.
Yes.
And Andrea, do you have something on that?
Okay, so this is per our contracting procedures. Contracts over 25,000 require council approval. So this is requesting your approval on the FY19 road repaving to select the bidder that was recommended by our town consulting engineering firm, Clark Azar, as the most responsible bidder, and that's MT Laney, and the contract is in the amount of $146,300.
146,300. 146,300. Okay. And can you just restate which streets we're repaving here, just so we have it on the record?
Do I have
Lower
that on me?
Kenilworth.
Yeah, can you want to jump in?
Sure.
Yes,
So,
I'd have it on.
the lower Kenilworth from Clyde to Rokeby, and then from Kenilworth, Rokeby from Kenilworth down to the end of Rokeby. Claremont from Oxford to the dead end of Claremont. And Kenilworth on the south side of Strathmore, from Strathmore to Oxford.
Wait, I'm sorry, say the last one again.
Sorry,
I was writing.
so it's
one up
Kenilworth
front.
from, yes, right out here.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, right.
From
Yeah,
Strathmore to
definitely-
Oxford.
Definitely needs it.
And then there's there'll be miscellaneous patching, deep depth patching. We put in additional money for FY19. So if there's any significant changes, we will definitely be back to talk to you about it.
And has Hans seen that? I know that he's
Yeah.
obviously not here tonight, but he's in.
Yeah.
Great. It aligns with everything we've been talking about along the way.
Right?
Great.
Yeah. Hans was out with the engineers, and I went one time as well to look at all these streets in person. He's been involved in it the whole way.
I just meant with with the final, presuming he
Yeah.
was here, he's voting yes.
Yeah, and he had
Yeah.
a copy of the package that was sent from the engineering
Great.
firm as well.
Excellent.
And what's the time frame that we expect them to start and finish?
I don't-
God willing, and the creek don't rise?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I have the template of the contract from the town attorney already.
Mhm.
So after your, approval tonight, I could, hopefully turn that around to them as soon as tomorrow or Wednesday and get that process going.
Okay.
So then I think we'd be dependent on probably weather and how soon they can kind of gear up.
And we obviously have school traffic we have to contend with. I think they were hoping to kind of work around that somehow, time-wise, but don't know.
One thing to keep in mind is that I know they frequently use the pool parking lot for staging area, but pool's opening at the end of May, and
Right.
so it's going to be full of pool patrons.
Okay, duly noted.
And they may do a soft opening before that, but it shouldn't affect us. But yeah, just figure that on Memorial Day weekend, it's got to be clear.
MT Laney has their own asphalt, by the way, which makes a significant difference in price,
That's good.
which is how it came down. Okay. Do we have a motion? You want to have a motion on this?
I guess in Hans's absence, I will move that we award the contract for the street repaving to MT Laney in the amount of $146,300.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay. We're going to have updates now. And it looks like I'm up on the SRTS project. So there were notices that we put out last week about the sealed bid opening for the sidewalk construction project. And that happened on Thursday. And we had 6 bids. They ranged from, I think I can say this, $588 up to $1,020,000. We don't want to get into too much detail because our civil engineers are still reviewing the proposals. They will be making a recommendation to us, and then we report up to the state highway. So where I'm going with this is that there is not, we are not at a point where we're negotiating. And that's why I do not want to give too much information, because based on who we pick. I can tell you that the lowest bidder was an outlier, way outside, by like 35% below the construction cost estimate. So of the 6, 5 of the bids were above the cost estimate. Okay? One was significantly higher, but not in the range as high as the lowest bidder, which was really low. Let's see. We're still waiting. This week we should be hearing, I hope, from the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to just concur with the Federal Highways determination or decision on the Section 106 compliance review. And once that we get that, then we are able to go ahead and make the award. But we have to go through a bunch of steps yet with State Highway, and we have to put together a concurrence for award package. And obviously, as you just heard me talk about the funding, we may have an issue on funding, which I have a phone call with the State Highway tomorrow to talk to them. And we have Ally. Would you like to speak? I just have a question. You have to use the microphone because it's on tape.
I'm Allison Pierce of Claremont Avenue. So, do I have to? Can you-
No, I just like.
So are we not required to accept the lowest responsible and responsive bidder?
We are required to take the lowest, most responsive bidder.
I think the most is actually not correct.
We are required to take the responsive lowest bidder,
The lowest responsive and responsive bidder.
responsible and responsive bidder, right. And
We
that,
can't decide who is most. They either are responsive and
well, there's, right, you look at the low bids, and then you see who's the most responsive and responsible, so it goes by types of forms that are filled out, whether there's any manipulation on numbers and unit cost, are they real, are they valid,
Right,
so there's,
it's an up or down determination of whether they are responsive and responsible. Each one is yes or no. And then you have
no,
to take yes.
yeah, it's not a straight yes or no, is it?
I
It's
think
not
they would,
Not really.
It's binary situation, unresponsive and responsible.
so I can, for example, with the street repaving project,
Yeah.
the lowest bidder was not,
Empty lane.
they left out a form
Correct. So
on the
they
street
were
repaving. So they were, right. So then they went to the
So they
next
weren't-
lowest bidder.
So they weren't responsive. They didn't meet the responsive test, right?
So each one is either responsive and responsible or not. And of the ones that you don't throw out as being either unresponsive or unresponsible, you take the lowest bidder.
As long as they're
There is no
responsive and
most-
responsible.
There is no most.
Okay. I'm not arguing the semantics, yeah.
Just clarifying.
I don't know if I have anything else on that. So we hope to hear more this week. God willing. Okay. That would be Jane.
Yeah,
Arboretum, anything?
Nothing major, no major updates as compared to last time. The final version of Part 1 of the comprehensive Arboretum plan has been received. The committee is waiting for the next version of Part 2, which is the nuts and bolts procedural manual portion of the plan. So it continues to be an iterative process of getting drafts from the consultant and reviewing those drafts. So still moving along.
Okay,
And we'll report next time.
great. Is there anything about a tree walk coming?
A spring tree walk, that's an excellent question, and I will
Okay.
ask that question.
Okay, Stephen, how are we doing with town hall?
Plan is still basically the same as reported last time. I think the time frame for doing the next session will be in the fall, after school's back in, kind of prepare all this information, diagrams, cost magnitude, studies of multiple options that would be in the fall. It doesn't say here specifically Historic Preservation Committee, but unless anybody objects, maybe I could just add one thing as a report from that committee who's helping work with this Town Hall renovation planning. Is that, just a reminder, May 4th is the Mid-Century Modern, I can't remember which time of the day it is now, but Mid-Century Modern Tour. Tickets are going to be available. I think it's posted on the website that folks can buy tickets if they want to join this. There'll be a reception at the end. It's going to be mostly Weymouth, a little bit of, I think, Keswick, and maybe one on Oxford and one on Montrose. It looks like it'll be a pretty interesting tour coming out.
It's in the minutes.
Okay. It has the streets.
No, it doesn't, but it's 12 to 4 p.m.
12 to 4 p.m.
on May 4th.
May 4th. Thank you.
Looking forward to that.
Unfortunately, I had to miss part of it. I had to coach a baseball game the second half of it, so.
Multiple hats.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Phil, on the archives?
I believe that we've mentioned, or if not, I kind of get a little confused at times, but that our chair of the archives quit. He resigned, Bill Elwood. So we are now working without a chair, and at the same time, we're also trying to hire a new archivist. So we've got a job description that will probably be posted this week, and then we'll see what we get. And we've brought on one additional member, so we should have a total of 4.
Who?
Charlie,
No, he hasn't been appointed.
okay,
Unless I missed a meeting.
okay, I thought, sorry.
So,
I thought he was already
because
on.
the archives is set by ordinance, the members have to be approved.
Right. Okay,
Right, so we
my
haven't,
mistake.
I don't think
thought-
we've discussed that.
I don't remember it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, and I was just going to ask, that was a nice prelude, a little off, but we need to, solicit for some volunteers, so.
we definitely need to.
Any ideas, putting it out on the website, or if you want to, write a little blurb, we can put it out on the GPML email list. Volunteers needed.
What's the total seats on the committee there?
6.
And how many are empty?
Is it 5?
5?
Yeah.
5 including a chair and
Yes.
one liaison?
No, 7 total.
I thought it was.
7?
Yeah, 7
Yeah,
total.
it's,
I'm sorry.
So I guess the question is,
Okay.
how many seats are empty? How many do we need to fill?
I think we need 5.
So we have 2.
We have
So
2 people, we need 5 people.
We only have 3 on the committee right now.
we have 3 on the committee right now.
Yes, okay.
Do you know for
We
sure?
have 3 on the committee in there.
No. You have the spreadsheet I sent, do you have it handy? You don't, do you? For the
No,
number of members on the, okay.
no, I didn't bring it.
I will verify that.
Yeah, I'm like 99% sure it's 7 because Historic has 5. And I think there was, Arboretum has 5 or something like that too. 7.
But I
And-
thought that was 5 counting the chair, so it must be, no, it wouldn't be because, the chair can vote, so.
Yeah, you
Right.
don't have an
Right, good night.
item.
So, so I think
Definitely
it's
sounds like we need an announcement to get some volunteers.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All right, thank you.
And nothing new on the traffic and parking.
Okay. We now have, the winter thaw. The ground is thawing, so putting in a sign or what we have down along Rokeby for the, the black market patrons and even the Mark Train parking. We were going to put a
Right.
sign. You met with
We met with
People
people
on-
there, and then
yeah.
I thought we had clarified the other sign for over on Weymouth.
Right, so we need to kind of bring that full circle now because, what didn't make sense really to put it in while the ground was frozen,
Right.
but, I think I don't even know what the full plans were for the signs on Rokeby along the
I'll
curve.
send you something, because
Were there a few sites for the signs or just?
it was just a couple, basically, it was just to try and bring one up. We were gonna put one that was going to be not exactly 20 feet from the intersection, but something,
So they
so
wouldn't
you
be
don't park,
parking all the
you
way
know,
around
park all the way around the corner.
Yeah,
That was going to be one, and I think there was one additional one to be put on the other side of the street, so people parking on both sides of the street.
right, okay, great. Okay. You don't have anything on the Strathmore Hill, do you? With Hans over here?
Let's see, Hans emailed SHAs. Last I knew, we hadn't heard anything back.
Okay,
But so nothing has, as far as I know, nothing has changed from that since last time, but he has followed up, so.
okay.
They did move that sign after you and Hans
Okay.
talked to them
Great.
about, because they just dropped a
Yeah.
post that was crooked and they put it on
Excellent.
less
They put-
clutter.
They put it on the lamp post.
They put it on the lamppost to match the others, so thanks for doing that.
Sure.
Dan, do you have anything to add? I have one more thing myself to add, but.
I do not.
Okay, all right. I wanted to mention, and Hans isn't here tonight, but to have discussed briefly about the stormwater as-built drawings. We've gotten them from the county
For the Rokeby.
for whole Garrett Park.
Oh.
So we can see what the original as-built drawings were, the underlying infrastructure for water and sewer. And we have one proposal from the Clark Azar. I don't know if we got the other one, so we're waiting. We have one for the Kenilworth Rokeby, and we are waiting on one, I think, still for the Claremont Montrose. And once we get that, and we'll send these 3 things out to the task force, the stormwater task force, and also to the neighbors that who are abutting to those stormwater drainage issues, problems, since they have wanted to be involved. Okay. We've got town manager's report.
Yes. Let's see. As far as the monthly financial report, the March revenues, operations, and capital budgets are at expected levels. Total revenues and expenses are within projections. There were 2 new building permits that are listed in the report. On behalf of the town office, just wanted to thank, among the many volunteers in town, those who are supporting the May election that Mayor Kaki mentioned earlier, both the poll workers and the judges. Wanted to point out that there are some maintenance improvements that have either already happened or will be happening in the coming months. So recently, the back stairwell at Penn Place was repaired. Let's see, there's a new shop roof that went on, and it was good that we did that because it turns out that the outer 2 feet was rotted of the plywood underneath the roof. Town Hall will be painted this spring, and recently George repaired the doors at the back of Town Hall. The doors were taken down, repaired, the hardware was repaired, as well as the doors, and they were rehung. And apparently it's been one of those sort of sticky issues for a while that even when Elizabeth gives tours, she would have to warn people about how to use the doors at the back of Town Hall, so that's been repaired as well. Many town office IT improvements are still underway, so I wrote about this in the Bugle, but a server was installed in the town office, new computers are being installed, and we're updating the AV system here. The town office has procured updated software like Office 365, and council will soon be brought into this discussion for your email addresses.
We could get something besides Rackspace.
Yes, you could
Yes.
check it on your phone and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, I have it on my phone. Don't like it, but I still have
Yeah.
it. I mean, I don't
You
like
might be able to
Rackspace.
share files too.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Adobe Acrobat and WebEx, and there's additional improvements that will be considered by council or have been considered by council during the FY20 budget process, such as an agenda management system that helps for town council meetings. And then lastly, just a reminder, and it sounds like looks like this has been in probably every manager report and Bugle column around this time of year for the last many years, but on your state income, it's too late for that anyway. Taxes were due today.
Well,
you've
Okay, well, if you've got a couple hours.
And the extensions.
On your
right.
state income tax form, please write Garrett Park in the box labeled city, town, or taxing area. And on our part, we're also going to submit a list of town addresses to the state to assist in this process so that we can get, the town can get its fair share of income tax revenues that are distributed by the state.
So there is a way, in case people forget to do it, to
Yeah, and I don't,
identify them as
I don't know
Garrett
the
Park
inner
town
workings of all
residents.
that process, but the best, most fail-safe thing is if residents all write it and
Oh, I
we
agree. Right,
submit a
right.
list. So that's it from me, though, unless anybody has questions.
Just a slight comment. I think we talked about it before, but if when the maintenance staff is going to repaint out front, especially the horizontal siding down below is not original, so they could just replace that with something new. The upper part, the shingles, those are original. They should
Right.
just paint that and leave it there.
With respect to the back stairwell at Penn Place, did that shield or whatever it needed to be so that we wouldn't have this recurring issue? Did that get done yet, or
No.
is it still not done?
No.
But the
not
stairs
yet.
were done.
The
They look
stairs
good.
were done. The stairs were definitely done, but the shield was not done, and that's the ongoing discussion with Andrea and I.
I
Yep.
think
I
there's
had-
a debate about who will pay for it.
Yeah, I had an initial discussion with Barbara Black talking about the lease, and while she was at the building, showed her the stairs to talk about some of that. And we looked at what's currently there and talked about some of the things that Phil, you had referenced, other solutions that had been discussed.
Right.
And so she's aware, but I wanted to have an initial discussion before having a more kind of prolonged discussion about solutions for that. So we'll be
But
sure to
it's
bring you
still
in on
in the
that.
hopper to
Yeah.
advance. Great.
Yeah, otherwise we'll end up
Doing the same
doing
thing
the
all
same thing,
again,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
Great.
We also had George fix something. He, at the back end of Penn Place, they've never had water over to the facility shed, right? The maintenance shed. But they found that there actually was a plumbing line. So he created a water line because it's already there. He could connect it up, he could do all the welding, and now they have a spigot that runs right there at the maintenance building, so that's cool.
Sounds like the days of Mr. Hill,
Hmm.
when it was a mystery where all the
Uh-huh. Okay, if there isn't any other questions or discussion, I think we're done. Yes? Okay. So adjourned.
Very timely.
All right. Why not watch?